Proceed.
Approval of minutes.
Motion by Susan, do I have a second? Second. Have a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Okay, fiscal year 2026 draft transportation planning work program.
So Carlos will be presenting the TPWP. Carlos, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. You're on the Mentimeter. It looks like it's just the intro slide on my end.
Yep. And...
I hear you, Carlos.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Technical difficulties.
There we go.
Learning. Yep.
So on a yearly basis, we're required to provide a transportation planning work program for the coming year. Here are the four kind of main priorities. One is we are in the process of updating our long-range transportation plan for the RPA. Our intention is to keep that going. It's due to Iowa DOT by November 17th. So thinking through timelines, we will likely be talking to you September or August through November for the approval process and allowing public comments. More to come. Two, we're going to look at block talks and coordinating with local communities. We're continuing our trail development assistance. This was with Pot County, and we're also focusing on Mills County in the next year. And last but not least, we're itching to get to work on this joint RPA 13 and 18 Safe Streets for All project. More to come on that. We are currently in contract negotiations, and we hope to get started soon. Next slide. So one of the changes we've also made this year is reduced our activities. So previously you used to see about 9 different activity codes where we focused our work. We've taken a more streamlined approach and condensed it down to 4. These relate to management and administration. So this includes all these meetings that we have, all the staff trainings that we send our staff to, such as the quarterly Iowa DOT meetings. That's captured under management and administration. Regional transportation planning, that's things that include the LRTP, working with local communities one-on-one on developing projects and enhancing projects going forward. Third is the TIP and the required documents that we have for that. And then fourth and not least, complete streets. So this covers a lot of the trails planning, a lot of the block talks, a lot of the work that we end up doing with transit, such as the PTP and other required documents. Last but not least, we're also showing our activity budget line for Safe Streets for All. That has remained unchanged at this point as we're still going through our negotiations. This number might get tweaked once we have an approved contract. The overall total for this year is about $69,868 for all of our activities. This is down a little from last year. Again, this probably has a lot to do with the population changes and the TMA designation. I think that's it. Next slide. And this is just an overview of the timelines that we're working on. This month, we're working on approval of the draft and opening up the public comment period mainly. The actual report or this planning document has to be into Iowa DOT by April 1st. Then in May, we come back, get everyone's comments back, and try to get the final approval of the final work plan So from here till around May, we have time to revise some of these budget or line items. We typically do not see a lot of changes. So it's, this is your time. And then we provide the final document to Iowa DOT by June 1st. During the same time period, we're also working on our transportation improvement program. I believe this year's is going to be pretty light, considering no applications were received for any of the TAP funding. There might be some additional changes that we're working on with a couple local communities that might impact this, but hopefully we could get it through as an administrative change, but that's going to happen. Final tip report is due to Iowa DOT in July. And I think that's it. So next slide. This is the motion. We're looking for approval of the draft plan and to open the public comment period. Prior to getting to that, if anyone has any questions or comments, happy to take them.
I'd make motion to recommend the approval of the draft and open public comment.
Motion. Second. Second by John. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. It's carried.
I'll make the motion that we approve the technical committee recommendation.
Motion carried. Alrighty, thank you. We'll move forward with the TPWP work. Thank you for that, Carlos. So I know we've been going a lot over the update of the bylaws. I don't want you guys to feel like you're getting fatigued with how much we've been talking about this. So we're gonna start moving into actual adoption. We went over a few things at our last meeting, which included there we go. Population threshold. So I'm actually gonna have you guys join the Mentimeter and we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna kind of make a decision on this, and then we'll start as staff. There's a few different things we're gonna have you guys kind of pseudo decide what you want us to do, and then we'll work those recommendations into the bylaws, and then we'll come back with the actual bylaw language as we develop it. So this isn't a motion, but it is just letting us know how you want us to proceed with these updates. So just as a refresher, the population threshold, we had Harlan technically dropped out of our minimum threshold this last round. Our minimum is 5,000. Harlan is just under that. So basically what that means is if we maintain 5,000, Harlan no longer has membership in the committee. If we go make that new threshold to be 4,000, we can keep Harlan in as a regular member. And then part of this was we want to make sure we're including other communities, and we had a lot of discussion on whether we wanted to include Missouri Valley or other communities. We lowered down to 2,500. That helps us get Missouri Valley in. 1,000 would add an additional 8 communities. That was not necessarily the recommendation from MAPA staff. MAPA staff would recommend the 25 limit, but it is up to the committee to decide how we want to move forward with that bylaw update. So I'll have you guys go ahead and join the Menti. If you haven't already, you can pull out your phones and the code is up there at the top and you can go ahead and put your vote in.
Do we know where the 5,000 came from? Is that used in other RPAs? What's the history of the 5,000, I guess?
You know, I'm not positive. I think that was just the standard at the time. Granted, our bylaws haven't been updated in over 20 years. So a lot of this is just built off of a time when those smaller communities were bigger, and because we're seeing a lot of decline in these smaller communities just when it comes to population, that slow kind of steady decline. It's just we're kind of at the edge where that number doesn't really work for those communities anymore for representation purposes.
Do the other RPAs use that number though?
That's a good question. I'm not sure I could answer that for all of the committees or all of the RPAs straight off the bat. We, I know at our last meeting, I presented on RPA-9 and I think it was 7 maybe, where they have small community representation. I didn't look into whether that affected their their actual membership population threshold cutoff though. That might be a different question. I can definitely look into that though. If there's any reason that we want to hold off on this, I mean, it's a pretty small change to the bylaws, so it's not like we're out here drafting, pages and pages. It's pretty much just like the number update essentially. So if that's something that the committee would like to hold off of until we have more information about how other committees are handling their population thresholds, we can do that. This is also related to the small community representation, which is actually the next thing that you guys will be answering about. So if that's something that you're wondering about in relation to this, then we can also talk about that as well. They're not necessarily the same thing, if that makes sense. Like doing this does not necessarily, if we did, if we do the 4,000, that keeps Harlan. We do the 2,500, that adds Missouri Valley to regular membership. And then the 1,000 is what would really kind of affect membership the most, because we'd be adding in a bunch of smaller communities. And that would essentially function as the small community representation. That's not necessarily the MAPA staff recommendation, just because that might make quorum unwieldy or more difficult to meet. But again, the small community representation, we'll talk about in the next question as well, if that answers your question.
So we did have a comment online from someone who logged in from their phone. I'm not sure who that phone number belongs to. I'm kind of trying to cross-check that, and they've since left the meeting, but the comment said 5,000 is the threshold that was set when RPA was formed. And I'm not sure if that's pertaining to RPAs in general or this one specifically. I think some more.
I think that was Scott.
On that.
I think that was Scott.
I think it was Scott. Okay. Yeah, I think it was Scott as well, but I haven't gotten confirmation yet. So.
I think we'll need that history before we finalize a draft. I mean,
Okay.
What we want to do is one thing, but how we got there is probably something we need to know before we get to the end of this.
And kind of somewhat related question for you, John, then. Are you representing Pot County or Harrison County today?
Not Harrison.
Not-
In terms, I don't know that I have any votes for them, but.
Yeah, I think
They
the
gotta be at
way.
the table, we're talking about Missouri Valley, but they're not.
So I think the way it would need to set up, just kind of as a tangent in future, is I think you can only represent one jurisdiction at a time.
I have all
So-
four.
Sorry?
I have all four.
Oh, yeah. Is that the plan? Is that the plan? But yeah, so I think if Harrison County still wants to make sure they have representation at this committee, they would have to designate some alternate so that you.
Yes, Scott. Scott.
Like, for example, like RPA-14 only has one community over 5,000, which is Creston, but they also have like small community representation. So it's however you guys want to do it. But yeah, the 5,000 threshold was the number that was set with the urban area boundaries back when they formed the RPAs.
I have you on speakerphone, so don't say anything too spicy. But the 5,000, was that just arbitrary back in the day, or was there something more meaningful than?
They wanted to include a larger community within the region to have a seat at the table because they have more federal functional routes than say a small town would have. And so that's the reason why the 5,000 threshold was there. But like in Harlan's case, I mean, they still have these same roadways that have federal functional classifications within their community. It's just that their population based on the urban area boundary fell below 5,000.
Yeah, that's my only concern is where the 5,000 came from. It doesn't look like we're all that divided in the room and what we want to do, so.
Okay, yeah, it's I think that was the number that was set because there was so many communities within the state that had a population over 5,000. They want to make sure that they have a seat at the table with the region.
Okay, so whatever we do is probably gonna be more cautionary than the original.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna hang up on you now, though.
I tried to rejoin. Questions?
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Sorry, does that answer your question? Sort of. Okay. All right. That sounds good. We'll go ahead and add that to the draft for the 2,500. All right, so the next one is going to be for the small community representation. The decision for the, you good job.
It was Scott again, but he hung up. So.
Okay, perfect. Lindsay, let me know if he has any more comments on the chat. So the decision for the population threshold affects what we do here. So the first one, membership as is plus one rotating caucus small community representative, that would be if we were adding maintaining Harlan and we're adding in Missouri Valley, then that would be we're adding one additional member past those two with those additional, right? Option two, that would be essentially the same thing, except for we'd be adding an additional 4 representatives for each county, plus the 2 that we're maintaining / adding. 3, which the third one would be the map of staff recommendation, would be that we'd actually include Harlan, or I'm sorry, Missouri Valley with that Glenwood and Harlan. So Glenwood, Harlan, and Missouri Valley would become the county representatives, and then we would add an additional, sorry, which county am I missing here? Yeah. I can't math. But essentially, those would act as the county representatives, those 3 communities would, and then we would have the additional for the 4th county that I cannot remember what that is right now.
Pottawattamie.
Yes. The other option, and this would be for equity purposes, would be to, because Pot County already has 2 votes, we could maintain what is essentially the third option, and then just keep Glenwood, Harlan, or adding Missouri Valley, and then that's it. So then Pot County wouldn't get a small community representative. That's another option, which I can actually update that. Any questions about that? I know that can be a little confusing. I'll go ahead and update this on the slide, so hopefully that clarifies things.
What county towns have 500?
No.
Oh,
Avoca doesn't reach 20, I think, because like
1,800.
that's what you think. Yeah. I could Google it, I guess.
What were you saying? Pot County already has 2 votes?
We have 2 votes.
yeah.
We have 2.
Pottawattamie kind of already has 2 votes, whereas each of the other 3 counties, they have 1 vote.
Avoca is just shy of 1,700.
So Mills only has 2 because you have Glenwood and Mills. Shelby has 2 because you have.
Yeah.
I always wondered why Harrison only had 1.
Mhm.
So really Harrison pulls even.
It's more fair that they would have now if we add in their county plus Missouri Valley. What would they would have Harlan and Missouri Valley?
Harrison, just Missouri Valley and Lincoln County. I'm sure we're all talking the same thing here. Sorry.
The 2 votes for Harrison be Harrison.
Missouri
Oh,
Valley.
Harlan's and Shelby, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's why
Yeah,
Shelby has 2
confused.
votes. So
So Pot County just has 2 votes to keep it equal, basically.
you can think that, but then it doesn't work for Harrison. So yeah,
Yeah.
I never understood how the votes came about.
It looks like Rachel's adding some options to the poll.
Yes. So hopefully this clarifies any question. Okay. Those would be the updated options.
They're all giving me a headache. Trying to figure out what it takes to get a quorum.
So as it stands, we're maintaining what we have now, which means and then we're adding one, so that would increase membership, so we would need, depending on how we decide to run the 50%, right now 50% is what is considered quorum, if we're adding in, because Glenwood and Harlan are already in membership, if we're adding in Missouri Valley, then that gets us to 3.5, so we could either maintain the 3 or go to the 4, I'm not sure what the standard is for when you have odd numbers like that. And then if we were to add additional small community representation beyond that, which, so that would basically hit us at option 4 would be, we would be adding like 1 additional person to current membership. 3 would get us to 8. 2 would get us, that would be adding 4. So that would get us to 11. And then 1 would also be just adding the 1 beyond Missouri Valley, so that would get us to 9. And then if we add number 5, the 5th option, again, that would be adding 2 to the 6, so that would be also 8. So in my mind, that doesn't make or break because that essentially shifts quorum by 1 person, 2 people max, unless we were to do the second option, which would add a lot more. Does that check out?
Yeah, we can decide if it's my decision or Susan's decision.
No. Does anyone else have any other questions about how the math works there?
Explain the difference between 3 and 4 to me.
3 and 4. So 3, that would be each county. So Glenwood, Harlan, and Missouri would function as county representatives, and then you would add another one for Pottawattamie. So then Pottawattamie would have their own small community representation, and that could function as just like caucus representative. So you could kind of merge 3 and 5 if you wanted to, so that the small caucus representative could be from Pottawattamie County. I think that overly complicates things a little bit. So we definitely don't have to do that, but that's an option. And then, so that's the difference between 3 and 5. And 3 and 4 would just be adding essentially what we did before, which would be adding Missouri Valley, and then that's it. We're not adding anything else. So staff recommendation would be to maintain the Missouri Valley edition and then have a rotating small caucus member.
Which is currently 5.
Yes.
Yeah. What's our strategy here? I don't have consistent recommendations. Yes. Okay, a lot of them are volunteer people. It's just it'd be like sitting there, city clerk.
Right.
Everyone would actually attest with her. Citation address, but that's, that's the split.
So, yeah. 2 guys. Choose do we want 3?
For some reason, helping one.
Yeah.
And here.
It takes a long time to understand the purpose of this organization, and I just can't see having a rotating person. It's gonna add much value.
Yeah, the small towns, the other towns, instead of somebody to another city. To do, I guess.
We usually over here with number 1.
Is that like that's a joint over there, or do you guys?
choosing number
It
1.
would be helpful if you all were able to jump on the Menti, but if not, Otherwise,
Charlie's
we
phone
can just.
won't log on.
Okay, gotcha. You can just note that. If you can be able to know that. Is it Charlie and Chris were for option number one?
I tried it on
My
my
vote,
phone.
my vote works.
Your
My,
vote's up there, okay.
just to be not,
That's good to know. We'll go back to Charlie wasn't able to.
My phone won't go on internet. I don't know what the heck's wrong with this. Brand new one, I throw it out the window.
Seems that way.
Probably the operator.
Doesn't look quite the same, does it?
Not necessarily.
And just as like a little bit of a recap from what we went over last time, we want to make sure that this body is serving our small communities as well as the counties that are a part of it. This is a decision body, but it's also somewhat of a group that can provide a lot of support to these communities that they otherwise wouldn't have, whether that's that training or just providing a forum where they can ask questions or additional.
And I know we talked a bit earlier about kind of that urban area boundary and federal functional classification of roadways within the small communities and what funding they would and would not be eligible. So I just want to point out that TAP funding or TASA funding specifically is not related to roadways, so they would be eligible for that funding stream as well.
The what, the pool doesn't look the same as the screen.
I voted for 3 and it put it under 2.
Oh, the numbers are gonna shift as people vote for things because it's just showing a ranking.
Yeah. Sorry, that might have been confusing.
Yeah, see, it's gonna move around that way as people put their votes in.
Oh.
You wanted?
So which one was MAPPA's recommendation?
MAPPA's recommendation would be this one that's red. That would be, we've already added Missouri Valley in with the population threshold change. So essentially that would, we would just be adding one small community representative that would essentially float and rotate.
Yeah, so I guess it's like a little confusing when we're talking about Glenwood, Harlan, and Missouri Valley as small communities and then talking separately about a small community rep. So I guess another way to think about it is Glenwood, Harlan, and Missouri Valley would be baked into the bylaws as existing members. And then we would have a small community representative for all of those communities under that 2,500 threshold that maybe don't have their own individual membership, but could kind of pool together and rotate around.
And those would pool from the communities that are over 1,000. So that would be from those 8 communities that would have otherwise been included in the 1,000 edition. And so those would be potentially the rotating representatives. That is dependent on whether that's something that those communities choose to participate in, but we won't know if we don't ask first either.
So we don't want to ask if it's not something that we're willing to follow through on.
Correct.
So you went with the third option.
Currently third base, yes.
I mean, second, third, and fourth are kind of all tied at the
Yeah.
moment. But
But I can't undo my vote.
we could maybe refresh and scrap if we wanted to start over.
Yes.
Should be able to do
we have to
So
vote online. or can we
explain to me
vote?
just
Yeah.
one more time. The first one and the fourth one.
Okay.
What's the major difference?
So kind of separating them out from how they're numbered here, because that's gonna jump around. We've got a
Okay.
couple different options. There's one that we just talked about on the last slide that is one representative per county, and then we have Glenwood, Harlan, and Missouri Valley included. So that's kind of what we just talked about in terms of changing that population threshold.
Mhm.
So that's one option. The other option is we have Glenwood, Harlan, Missouri Valley, and then a rotating small community representative that kind of goes between those 8 communities that are below the population threshold, but over 1,000 people. So that would add Missouri Valley, which we kind of discussed already in the last slide, and then add someone else to kind of do that rotating representation. The other option we've got here is that you have one small community rep per county. So the only difference there is that we would have an additional representative for Pottawattamie County, because Pottawattamie doesn't have a small community that's above that 2,500 threshold. So that's kind of what's showing up here as that third option. So then Glenwood, Harlan, and Missouri Valley would count for their counties, and we'd add someone else for Pot County, and then that would be it. But it would be specifically for Pot County. It wouldn't be a rotating person for those smaller communities. And then we've got that plus the smaller community rotating rep. And those are kind of the biggest difference. The one that's listed as second right there is kind of existing membership, which would not add Missouri Valley, even though we kind of already talked about that earlier as something that the committee wants to do. So that second option that's currently listed is membership as is, which currently does not include Missouri Valley, but includes the rotating caucus rep.
Yeah, and I wanted to include Missouri Valley.
So when I say membership as is, that's with the understanding that we're including Missouri Valley from this point on.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. With that change, I probably could have phrased all this a little bit more clearly.
I feel like we need a diagram or something.
That's not a bad idea. If we want to hold off on this until I can present this information in a way that maybe is a little more digestible for everyone, we could totally do that. It's up to the group.
I think we're getting close.
Okay, yeah, this is good. We're making progress. I'm glad that we've kind of got an idea of where we want to go with this. I'll put together some visualizations that can sort of show this a little bit better for the next meeting, and we can move from there.
And what a quorum will look like.
Yes.
So yeah, so we would need a visualization of what the membership would look like and then what the corresponding total membership and quorum requirements would be.
Perfect. All right, we will keep this moving. Thank you, everyone. All right, it is that time of year again. We will not be voting on this today. This is sort of just an FYI. And also, we're going to take a look at the election cycles. This is going to be part of the bylaws updates, because right now those election cycles are annual, which that seems like a really short turnaround, especially considering we typically only have around 8 to 10 meetings per year. And if we're electing people every year, we just don't think that is necessary with this body. So we're taking a look at updating that within the bylaws. Just as a reminder, we typically do those elections at the May meeting, which is on May 21st this year. And then they would assume responsibilities in July. This is our current board setup, and as well as the responsibilities for those different boards and who makes up those different boards. We currently do not have bylaws for technical committee. Those updates will be coming at the next meeting. I'll be presenting some options, and we'll kind of start moving forward on the technical committee bylaw front. Policy board will essentially be maintaining what it's already doing within the bylaws. And right now we're just looking at that election cycle update. Here's some responsibilities. This is for you guys to keep in mind for our next meeting when we do have those elections, if we decide not to change from the annual. So if we decide to change from an annual election, and we'd still need to do the elections for this year because those bylaws updates won't probably take place until after July. So we'll still be going through this election cycle the same way we would with the current bylaw setup. So if you have any nominations or people that you want to think about, or if you would like to run, again, I don't believe that there's any limitations on how long you can be in a position. So if you want to maintain the positions, we can also do that. That's an option. But this is just to get you thinking kind of on what we want the board officers to look like in the coming year. And then those will be more static or more static going forward if we change up the leadership election cycles. Here we go. All right. So I'll have you do another one of these. I know you're probably sick of Menti at this point. Maintaining annual. Again, this doesn't kick in this year. This would kick in for our next election cycle next year. Maintaining annual would mean we do elections every year and every 2 years, every 3 years, etc.
And Charlie, if you want me to put a vote in for you, I can do it through my phone if that would make it easier. If you want to let me
I
know.
would
what-
say every 2 years.
Every 2 years, okay. Got it on the plan.
Actually, Charlie wanted perpetual.
He's like, I don't wanna be stuck here.
I've been on it quite a while.
Yeah.
We appreciate your service.
Ever since Hart left, I don't know how many years ago.
Okay, so you said every 2 years, right, Charlie?
Looks like we have a majority. We'll go ahead and work that into the bylaws updates. Again, that won't kick in for this election cycle, so we'll still hold elections at our next meeting. So just be thinking about whether you'd like to rerun or run if you're not an officer already, or run for a different leadership role. And then we'll hold those elections at our May 21st meeting. So make sure you show up for that.
Might be elected in your absence.
Can you do that?
I don't know.
No, that's a good question.
I feel like we have done it, whether we should or not.
Alright, so the Destination Iowa Fund will keep things moving. The Destination Iowa Fund grant program, we're wanting to make sure we present different opportunities for funding to the committee membership. This is one that we've been looking at and working through to see how it could benefit our communities. It is both state and federally funded, but the federal portion is not accepting applications at this time, so we won't discuss that one. But the state one is, and that's if you are a city, county, or nonprofit organization. It does not include schools or other kind of pseudo governments that are semi-government old. So this purpose for the grant itself is investing in vertical infrastructure to create or expand existing primary destinations to increase tourism to the state. That's a mouthful. But that's directly from the guidelines that they released around the funding opportunity. Vertical infrastructure is referring to primarily buildings, but it also includes land acquisition and construction, as well as some trail development. So this has some potential. If you were to do something like trail development, it does also require that there is like more of a vertical component to that, as far as like building development as well. So as long as, but it can include those trails as well. So there's some flexibility in there. The funding allocation is 10 million for this fiscal year. The local match is a little bit tricky. That's where things get a little bit harder for these, especially if you're a smaller community. It is a 75% requirement for local match, and you have to have 65% of that before you submit the pre-application, which we'll go through here in a minute. It does have a 50% rural set aside, so that's an option. And with that 1.5 million is the minimum project cost. So these are fairly large projects for small communities. Okay. This is kind of reiterating some of what goes into that eligibility. They need to be tourism oriented. So those primary destinations, some of you familiar with secondary destinations, so they can also be supportive. It doesn't necessarily have to be those designated primary tourism destinations. If you look at the guidelines, which I have linked in these slides, they're also in the agenda. I can also send that out separately if you guys would like access to that link. Elsewhere, the guidelines break that down into definitions of what those primary and secondary destinations are, as well as some other glossary terms that might be useful if you're looking into this grant a little further. Again, that vertical infrastructure, land acquisition, construction, major renovation, repair buildings, as well as you'll see those trails, which I know are of interest to this group. And please note that it does not include just regular maintenance or things occurring, recurring expenses. Great. So the way this works, there's a 2-step grant application. You have to submit your pre-application, which includes things like your budget, your scope, and confirmation that you have secured that 65% of the total estimated cost. You would need an additional 10% local on top of that. So the grant is only for the 25% of the project. It also requires that you're showing local support and that you've got that built into a community plan or vision. So any questions about that before we move on? All right, keep going. Charlie, would you like to open public comment?
Comments?
All right,
I
hearing
would
none.
move on to additional business.
Go ahead. All right, so we've got a couple MAPA updates. You guys might remember the Safe Streets for All program that was applied, that MAPA applied for on behalf of the 7 communities in RPA 18 and 13. We did procure consultants for that, where we're going with SRF and Snyder as the sub consultant. So we recently, just this last week, we had a scoping meeting with them, and we're moving forward on that front. I think that's going to be a really great project. We will be reaching out and to those communities and keeping them regularly apprised of the progress and public engagement as well within those communities. And we'll also regularly be presenting the progress that is made before this committee as well. Is there any questions about that? Otherwise, I'll open the floor to anyone else who has updates.
Nothing? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Got a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Second, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Meeting adjourned.
Hey, John, would you give me a
Just
call when you
reminder,
get
our
home?
next meeting.
Wait, Scott's saying something.
Oh, I was just having, see if John can give me a call after a bit when he gets time.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Just as a reminder, we probably will not be having the April meeting unless there's a tip amendment requirement or something else comes up that we would need to take action on or otherwise discuss. So definitely plan to be at that May 21st meeting, as that will be an important one. We'll be doing a draft tip approval, and as well as working with some other action items such as elections.
The final TPW.
Yes, and the final TPW. So make sure you're able to make it to that meeting. But otherwise, that's all I've got. Thank you guys.